Good morning and welcome to lesson number 3, Memorials of Grace, as we look through lessons of faith in the book of Joshua. And this is primarily from Joshua chapter 4, when the Israelites, having crossed the Jordan, pick up stones from the river and construct a kind of a stone memorial out of those stones, each big stone picked up by one of the members of each of the 12 tribes as a memorial of grace of God helping them to cross the river Jordan. In the same way that they had crossed the Red Sea on dry land, they cross the river Jordan without having to swim for it. It's a memorial of what God has done. And I think that we are also in need of memorials. We're a forgetful people. You know, we have to tie knots in our handkerchiefs. We have to write ourselves little notes, little post-it notes, and put them on our computer, remind us of something that we're going to have to do, or something that we know we should have done in the past. There's always some need to remind ourselves of what we have done and what we need to do. And in the same way that those Israelites remembered what God had done for them, and that they wanted to remind people in the future, they were to tell their children about it and their children's children, so that when anybody came along and said, what are these stones stacked up here for? They could say, well, that's to remind us of how God took us across the river Jordan and brought us into the promised land. I'd love to know where those stones are now today, but like many things, they pass away. But for the time, they were really important as a memorial, so that anybody could go back there and say, yeah, this is the very spot right here where we crossed the river Jordan and entered the land that God had promised to each and every one of us as we began this exploration of what God had given us after such a long journey. And I think as we think of our own lives today, as we think of how God leads us, how he cares for us, how he gives us grace when we don't deserve it. That's the whole point of grace, isn't it? We're not getting something as a reward. It's because of God's graciousness. And I always want to talk about God's grace. You know, it tells us we are saved by faith because of God's grace. And let's make sure we put God in it. It's God's grace that saves us. It's nothing to do with ourselves, just like it was nothing to do with those Israelites crossing the Jordan. It was God who took them across. It's God who takes us through this life. It's God who helps us on our personal journey. We are saved by grace. And without that perspective, then we always tend to sort of try and work for it, as if we can do something of our own to gain it. And I think we need to remind ourselves time and time again about how God has given us all these blessings of grace. You know, there's that song we sing, count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. And I think that's something good for all of us as we think back as to what God has done in our lives, how he's led us through problems and troubles and given us so many wonderful gifts. We are here in this world to live, and life is very precious. We need to remember that. And the whole point of us being here is not to say, okay, this is great for me and I want to get everything for myself. No, it's to come to know God and express that grace and his love to others around us. That's the really important thing. That's why we're here, not to serve ourselves, but to make sure that we too are a blessing of grace, if you will, to those who are around us as well. So as you think about these things this week and the memorials of grace, we don't set up too many memorials around the towns. Sometimes you see things like war memorials. I suppose you see gravestones as memorials. Those are in stone as well. But we don't see too much of that. we need to make sure that we give ourselves memorials of what God has done, mental memorials, if you like, as to what God has done to help us and to save us so that we can be there in the promised land together with him.